within minutes, only a few minutes of when the gunman opened fire. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on. We're here in Aspen, Colorado. In our strategy session, joining us, the former Democratic Congresswoman Jane Harman. She's now president of the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington. Also joining us, the former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff. He's chairman of the Chertoff Group. They're both here as well for the Aspen Institute Security Forum. We'll have more on that coming up today and tomorrow. But let's talk a little bit about what happened. An interesting quote, and Congresswoman Harman, I want to throw it out to you first. This is from Ibrahim Kazarouni. He's the imam of the Denver Muslim community. And here's what he said. I'll put it up on the screen. He said, "If my name is Ibrahim or Muhammad and I order a gun or that much ammunition on the internet, I think within a few hours of the delivery, the FBI and the CIA is at my house." Is there some sort of double standard going on here? You know what's going on in Homeland Security. What would you say to this imam?
Well, I certainly hope there's not a double standard. Muslims are law-abiding Americans like everybody else. It's a few bad apples who are non-Muslim and Muslim that cause problems like this. But we don't have enough monitoring, since he raises this, of anybody's gun purchases, and especially purchases of 6,000 rounds of ammunition. I think it's shocking that we don't have a way to trace this better.
Mr. Secretary, so if James Holmes's name had been Mohammed or Ibrahim and he had ordered 6,000 rounds of ammunition, assault weapons, all the other camouflage equipment, gear like that, would there have been a different, could this have been stopped in advance? Yeah. In other words, would law enforcement, whether at the local, state, or federal level, have intervened before someone could go into a movie theater?
Wolf, I think you have to separate two different things. If someone's name was on a watch list already, whatever the ethnic background, obviously that would have called for a much more serious and intense scrutiny. In terms of just the average person, whatever their name, ordering quantities over the internet, I don't know that we have a monitoring program yet that looks at the amount of ammunition or whether you buy tactical gear and body-protecting armor. And it may be that we should have some kind of a system in place where we monitor certain kinds of equipment in much the same way we do with explosive material. But it's a complicated issue. The civil libertarians would get all upset if you're doing too much monitoring. So you have to calibrate and set the threshold at a
when you say monitoring, what you're really saying is profiling, right?
No. We're able to know if you buy multiple prescriptions. I don't know why we shouldn't put munitions on that list. After all, the National Rifle Association, the R is for rifles. It's not for military-style assault weapons and these packs of repeated munitions. And Congress voted to ban 19 varieties of assault weapons in 1994. I made that vote. I was proud of that vote. And we let that ban lapse. And I think this incident should teach us a lot about early detection of people who seem to be dropping out and are loners. We learned this in the Gabby Gifford shooting, too.
What lesson did you learn?
I would just say we should now ban purchases of these multiple munitions.
Well, before I get to your lesson, would you agree that somebody goes out and buys within a few weeks or even a few months 6,000 rounds of ammunition, that should be enough to stop what's going on?
It should certainly raise a question.
But, should the federal government be monitoring that?
Well, again, and when you say monitoring, you have to be careful about how you do it. But if it becomes evident that someone's buying huge quantities of ammunition, or they're buying body-protecting armor, and there's no legitimate explanation. I mean, and there may be many legitimate explanations. Sure, there ought to be some focus on that. But, one of the lessons here is much of the most lethal activity Holmes engaged in was building booby traps and explosives. And the raw material for that isn't armaments or guns. It's some of the material you can find in your own kitchen. So you're kidding yourself if you believe that simply monitoring material is going to answer the problem. It's a lot about people and not things.
And I agree that it's a lot about people. And I think that we need to have better systems for, I think David Brooks had a very good op-ed about this yesterday. If someone's in your community and all of a sudden seems to detach, and this guy was in a school setting and people might have noticed this, there should be some questions asked. And it's It's snooping in one sense, but in another sense, we've learned enough about these lone shooters to know that many of them have this personality change at a point, and then they snap. And this doesn't have to do with their being Muslim. I mean, we should learn from this shooter incident over the weekend, yet another in Colorado. Two of the worst ever have been in this state, and the state is very resilient. We'll have to commend it.
Let's not forget the Fort Hood massacre as well.
And that's a very interesting point, because a lot of the challenge is people who do see something and they don't follow the precept to say something. And not only do we have Fort Hood, where based on the report that came out last week, it looks like there were some missed opportunities, but in a totally different way, but still somewhat similar, look at the whole Penn State issue. Here's a guy who's molesting children. People see it, and somehow they can't bring themselves to report it. So this is part of changing the culture. So we don't view it as a negative thing to report this kind of behavior.
Let me ask you a political question. Tom Ridge, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, former Republican governor of Pennsylvania, man both of you know, he was asked what grade he would give the President of the United States on national security, and he said he would grade the President with a C. What grade would you give the President?
Wolf, I don't do grades. I finished with grades when I graduated from law school. And I also don't do politics, so I'm not going to do
But you are supporting Mitt Romney.
I am, but look, when I look at Homeland Security, there's been a lot of continuity, and I think a lot of what you've seen in terms of the response that Secretary Napolitano talked about is the investment all of us have made over 10 years and want to continue to make. To me, the real lesson for everybody is the threats are out there. They continue to adapt and change. We have to adapt and change, and we're all in it together. You know, when a gunman, whether it's Holmes or Hassan, starts to shoot, he doesn't pick between Republicans and Democrats. He just kills Americans.
As far as the biggest Homeland Security threat right now, a lot of people think it's what we call the lone wolf. Is that your opinion?
I think so. I think people like Holmes, who have clean records, he didn't even have a parking.
He had a speeding ticket.
Oh, he had a speeding ticket. I didn't even know about that. But a lot of these people have clean records, and in the case of the jihad types, they become radicalized on the internet. Something we need to understand better. Something I tried to do in my role as chairman of the Intelligence Subcommittee of the Homeland Security Committee in the Congress. But then the civil libertarians say, oh, you can't ask those questions. I think we should ask those questions about everybody, not just about Muslims. We should understand that point where somebody with radical views, which are protected by our Constitution, is prepared to engage in extreme behavior. And that would help us, I think, intercede earlier. But I just want to say something about the Obama administration, which is that its record here is very strong. And the foreign policy record of President Obama, starting with the takedown of Osama bin Laden and starting with a very vigorous pursuit of bad actors around the world, is building on the Bush administration record, and I think showing strong results. Where we need to move, either president after this election,